Well, greetings, YouTube. Hope everybody had a great Easter. Those of you who celebrate Easter. This video actually is a response to a video made by DEMCAD. And if you haven't seen it, if you've arrived at this video a different way, go check him out. He's got a lot of good videos, and I really do enjoy watching his videos. And there's a lot to learn, a lot to be learned by his great ideas. Now, in this case, this particular case, he was talking about, and I want to apologize ahead of time if you hear a lot of background noise. I'm in my basement, and everybody's eating above me, directly above me, so the noise filters down. So I apologize for that. And of course, now my cell phone's ringing, so Murphy's Law. Anyways, his basic premise was that on his video was that he felt that people should bug in and not bug out. In other words, that you should have your preps and everything in order and be able to sustain yourself in your home where you're at, as opposed to waiting until the shit hits the fan and then getting caught up in traffic or road closures and not being able to make it to your bug out location. And I understand what he's talking about. I understand the concept, but I personally don't think I'm going to take a little bit of issue with it because I don't think that could apply to everybody, and probably not even most people. And here's why. Certainly, if you're living in an apartment in New York City, or you're living in an apartment in Los Angeles, California, or in any of a number of very, very crowded cities, that is not always going to be possible. I mean, I'm just going to be frank and tell you, I'm from Los Angeles, and I can't even imagine bugging into some of the places that I've grown up at and that I've been around, because you wouldn't survive that long, depending on the level of shit that hit the fan. In some cases, your chances of survival would be slim to none, quite frankly, based on a lot of different factors that I probably don't need to get into. But just the congestion, the type of environment that you're in, there's a lot of different factors that come into play. So it's not always a good idea. And in fact, myself, I live in a beautiful area here in Virginia, and my bug out location, if you've seen my videos, I have a beautiful mountain cabin, and a nice secluded 12 acres of property way up in the Shenandoah Mountains. That's about an hour and a half away from here. So I know that according to DEMCAD, that's too far in his opinion, and I disagree because it works for me. However, here's what I have to say about having or about bugging in. I think that if you're going to stay completely isolated in your own location where you're at now, I think you run a great risk, depending on like I said, what's happening in the area around you. If you live in a safe place, if you're already in an area that is already sustainable, you live near a large body of fresh water, you're in a defensible position, you've got a community of people that are willing to work with you, your food supply is taken care of, that's a different scenario. But if that's not the case, I still recommend that you have a bug out location if you can. Clearly, if you cannot afford one, or there's absolutely no way that you can have a secondary location to bug out to, then it's a moot point. There's no reason to even discuss it. But if you can, I think you should. And here's why. Or here's how I address DEMCAD's issues or concerns. The part about the road closures, yes, that can happen. Now, I was in the riots of Los Angeles in 1992. Of course, I was deployed down there for many, many, many days and didn't come home. I was working at the time. I was a police officer with Los Angeles at the time. So that was one experience I had. And then I went on to a different agency out here on the East Coast in D.C., and I ended up being deployed to Katrina. So I've seen a lot of this from many different aspects in terms of societies melting down and without rule of law and what people can do to each other. But more specifically, I understand that the roads do get closed and the National Guard gets brought in, and there's all kinds of any number of different variables that can take place. And the key, in my opinion, is you have to have absolute situational awareness before the event. Now, if a satellite is hurtling out of control toward your head right now, then there's probably not a lot of you can do in terms of situational awareness. You can't walk around looking up all day. I understand that. But you can, for the more likely events, you can stay alert. Uh, you know, if you're not aware of what's happening in the world today, because let's face it, it's an extremely volatile time where we wouldn't be on YouTube talking about bug out locations. So it's incumbent upon all of us to not just watch Fox News or CNN or whatever. We need to watch utilize multiple resources to obtain our news. Because let's face it, we certainly can't trust the media here in this country. It was completely sold out, with few exceptions. So what I recommend and what I practice is I listen to the BBC to get the perspective of what's going on over in that part of the world. You can listen to Russian news. All of this is available on the internet. If you're watching me now, you're probably connected to the internet. So you really have multiple ways to see what's happening around the world, get different perspectives, stay alert, stay alive. Don't wait until the last minute. My rule of thumb, having been through a few different things, is that we look what we here's a good example, the Trayvon Martin shooting. Now I'm not going to get into that in terms of the politics of it, but what we do know is that the tensions are high. There is a potential for a Rodney King-like eruption in Sanford, Florida. Once that happens, let's use that as a what if. If something like that happens down in Florida, that's your cue to start paying close attention. Are you seeing similar events or related events that are occurring in multiple cities, multiple locations at once? My rule of thumb is if I see 3 hotspots happening in our country, in 3 different states, no matter what it is, whether it's the Trayvon Martin incident, or some people go crazy at the gas pumps and start shooting, and then you see copycat type thing, whatever it is. When I see 3, I go ahead and I bug out. I don't wait for things to digress to where you've got National Guard troops roaming down the streets in squad formation. You've waited too long. You're probably not going to make it to where you're trying to go. So people might say, well, what are you going to do, Mike? Bug out every time something happens? No, if it meets the criteria, we head out. And if nothing happens, then we enjoy an overnighter at a beautiful place that we have set up, and we use it as an opportunity to drill some of our stuff, maybe test fire some of our equipment, whatever. Some of our weapons. It's just good. Try a different way, a different path to get there, so that you're not always dependent on the same path. You got to have multiple plans too. Multiple plans, because what if the thing that's happening is happening between you and your bug out location? So you got to be smarter than the average bear, so to speak. If you sit around and wait until you see smoke pouring up over your neighbor's house and you realize that the city's melting down, you're definitely going to have to stay where you're at. So you got to stay alert. Another thing that I do, and a lot of folks may or may not agree with this, is I split my prepping supplies. And you got to come up with your own formula based on a set of probabilities that you arrive at, because you're the one that's going to have to live or die with your decisions. In my case, it's about 60-40, meaning that 60% of my efforts and preparation go to my bug out location and 40% go here. And why would I maintain 40% here at this location? Because there may be events that force me to use this as my bug-in location, whether it's a solar flare or an EMP, kill shots from the sun that render electronics and motor vehicles completely useless. If that's the case, then it looks like I'll be staying here. So I would be foolish to have all of my eggs in one basket. If I have all of my prepping supplies and ammunition and weapons up at the cabin, and I'm here and I don't have anything here, then I'm an idiot. So you have to, you have to plan for that kind of thing. So another thing is I want to talk about is having a shelter or a temporary bug out location midway between where you start and where you want to end up. If your location is far away, like mine is, mine's like 130, 140 miles away, it's a good idea to know about different areas, or at least a midway spot that you can bug out to, should there be an event en route that causes you to have to deviate, where you don't want to turn back but you can't keep going, or it's not the prudent thing to do to keep going. So those, something you have to constantly be thinking and adjusting, not stressing and worrying, but just thinking and adjusting and staying on top of it. Now, DEMCAD also talked about in his video the possibility of people already occupying. This was a negative in his opinion in terms of having a bug out location. Was, well, what if there are people there? Now you run the risk of having a violent situation. Now, because I do have a 12-acre piece of property that I own, and that's my bug out location, I can tell you that there is no definitive answer in terms of what I'll do if I show up there and there's people there. It really depends on who's there. If there's a Girl Scout troop or a Cub Scout den that is taking shelter in my property, I'm probably not going to go in guns a-blazing. You understand what I'm saying. Now, if the Hells Angels happen to be taking over the property by the time I get there, then there's probably going to be some trouble, because I'm not going to give up my location for anybody. So, my suggestion to you is, and I used Hells Angels randomly, if it was gang members or a bunch of big people in business suits and ties, if they are a threat, they'll be treated as a threat, and I know how to deal with threats. Now, on the other hand, I want to caution all of you and remind myself that everything that you do, whether it's eradicating your location of unwanted guests, make sure that you can justify it. Now, people are talking about without rule of law and all of this, and I get that, but remember, never forget that rule of law, loss of it, is probably not going to be permanent. And it's for a great many reasons, it's important that you understand that you're going to be held accountable for your actions. If you see the lights on in your cabin and you go in there spraying machine gun fire and you kill everybody in that cabin, is that going to hold up when the situation's completely under control and you're standing in a courtroom in front of a jury and you're explaining why you mowed down people? I'm not saying that you can't justify it, but think about it now and get it through your head. Have those lines in the sand already defined in your head. When will I use lethal force, and can I justify it? Because no matter what you think, if you're an end-of-the-world person that thinks we're going to have to start all over from the ashes, you still, if you're a decent person, want to have, you still desire to have rules and consequences for not following the rules. And you don't want to certainly be a Saddam Hussein. History catches up to every one of those people. You saw bin Laden, he got taken out. Saddam got taken out. You cannot operate with impunity no matter what the situation is. So understand that, if you're going to resort to deadly force, whether it's to get people out of your bug out location or whether it's to get into a place because your family's starving, it's a good idea to imagine that everything's being videotaped and that you're going to have to explain that videotape, a year or 5 years down the road. Or in Saddam's case, it was 50, 30, 40 years, however long he was head cheese in Iraq. So just use some caution. You don't want to go in spraying if you can help it, because nobody. I'm going to tell you from experience. If you haven't taken lives, that's great, good for you. I'm envious. And if you have, you know what I'm talking about. It's not something that should be done lightly, and just be prepared to understand that you got to live with it. Okay. And don't get me wrong, there are certainly more than a few scenarios where people legitimately need to be put down. That's why I've got an array of weapons here. I mean, I don't sit around with a double drum of 223 because I'm a peacenik, or I'm prepping to go to nun school. That's not what it's about. I'm just saying, be careful and understand what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. Other than that, DEMCAD, good videos always, and YouTube, like I said, happy Easter, and thanks for watching. Leave your comments. If I left something out and you want to support my idea, either make a response to my video and or throw it in the comments. If you absolutely disagree with what I said, don't say anything to me because I'm sensitive and it'll hurt my feelings. I'm just kidding. Leave your comments in the comments section and let's have a dialogue. Stay safe, stay alert, and stay alive.